The eviction notice crumpled in Maya's trembling hands like her dreams had crumpled 3 months ago when David walked out, leaving behind only empty promises and an even emptier bank account. Her 5-year-old daughter Emma pressed against her leg, sensing the storm clouds gathering in their tiny apartment, while Maya stared at the red letters that screamed final notice with the cruel indifference of bureaucracy. "Mommy, are we going to be okay?" Emma's voice was barely a whisper, her wide brown eyes reflecting the same fear that had been Maya's constant companion since becoming a single mother. Maya knelt down, forcing a smile that felt like broken glass. "Always, baby, Mommy's going to figure something out." But as she held her daughter close, breathing in the familiar scent of strawberry shampoo and innocence, she wondered if this was the lie that would finally break them both. The job posting on the childcare website seemed too good to be true, seeking compassionate nanny for 7-year-old boy, competitive salary, live-in position available, experience with trauma-affected children preferred but not required, serious inquiries only. Maya's cursor hovered over the apply button for 20 minutes. She had no formal nanny training, no references from wealthy families, no impressive credentials, just a mother's heart that understood pain and a desperation that made her brave. She clicked send before courage could abandon her entirely. The response came within hours, and 2 days later, Maya found herself standing before the imposing iron gates of the Blackwood estate. Emma's small hand clutched in hers. The mansion beyond looked like something from a fairy tale, all stone turrets and manicured gardens that probably cost more to maintain than most people earned in a year. "This is where we're going to live?" Emma breathed, her earlier anxiety replaced by wide-eyed wonder. "Maybe," Maya whispered back, straightening her one good interview dress and praying her desperation didn't show. Alexander Blackwood answered the door himself, which surprised her. She'd expected a butler or housekeeper, not the man whose face had graced the covers of Forbes and Fortune magazines. In person, he was younger than she'd imagined, maybe late 30s, with dark hair that looked like he'd been running his hands through it and eyes the color of storm clouds. But it was the weight in those eyes that caught her attention, the same exhaustion she recognized in her own mirror each morning. "Miss Chen," he said, his voice carrying the crisp authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. "Thank you for coming." The house was a museum of wealth and silence. Maya's footsteps echoed on marble floors as Alexander led her through rooms that could have housed her entire apartment building. But it was the silence that unsettled her most, a profound quiet that felt less like peace and more like held breath. "Before we discuss details," Alexander said, pausing outside a closed door, "you should know about my son. Gabriel hasn't spoken in 8 months." Maya's heart clenched. "What happened?" "Car accident." The words were clipped, professional, but Maya caught the tremor underneath. His mother was driving. She didn't survive. Gabriel was in the car when, he cleared his throat. "Multiple therapists, specialists, doctors, they all say the same thing. Trauma-induced selective mutism. He'll speak when he's ready." The door opened to reveal a playroom that looked like a toy store had exploded, but in the corner, curled up in a window seat with a book, sat a small boy with his father's dark hair and the most heartbreaking eyes Maya had ever seen. Gabriel looked up when they entered, his gaze moving from his father to Maya with the careful assessment of someone far too young to be so guarded. "Gabriel," Alexander said, his voice gentling in a way that transformed his entire face, "this is Maya. She might be joining our family." The word family hung in the air like a question mark. Gabriel's eyes met Maya's, and in that moment, she saw Emma and him add the same weariness, the same quiet strength of a child forced to grow up too fast. "Hi, Gabriel," Maya said, settling cross-legged on the floor without invitation, ignoring Alexander's surprised expression. "I have a little girl about your age. Her name's Emma, and she loves books too." "What are you reading?" Gabriel didn't answer, but he held up the book Where the Wild Things Are and Maya's heart squeezed. "Emma's favorite." "That's a good one," she said conversationally. "Emma always says she wants to visit where the wild things are, but I tell her she might get homesick." Something flickered in Gabriel's eyes, not quite a smile, but close. The interview continued in Alexander's office, but Maya found herself thinking about the boy upstairs rather than the salary Alexander mentioned. which was more than generous, or the benefits, which were comprehensive. When he offered her the position on the spot, she almost couldn't believe it. "You don't know anything about me," she said, bewildered. "I know enough," Alexander replied. "I know you sat on the floor to talk to my son. I know you didn't look at him like he was broken. And I know desperation when I see it. I've been wearing it for 8 months." The first weeks were like learning to dance with ghosts. Gabriel was a shadow child, present but not present, watching everything with those 2 old eyes. Emma adapted faster, charmed by the mansion's wonders and seemingly oblivious to Gabriel's silence. She chattered enough for both children, including him in conversations he couldn't join, sharing toys he barely acknowledged. But Maya watched. She saw how Gabriel's fingers twitched when Emma laughed, how he positioned himself where he could see both girls during their games, how he always made sure Emma got the bigger cookie when Maya wasn't looking. Alexander was a different kind of puzzle. By day, he was the billionaire CEO, all sharp suits and sharper focus. But at night, Maya would find him standing outside Gabriel's room, just listening to the sound of his son breathing. He loved the boy with a fierce desperation that was painful to witness, but didn't know how to reach him across the chasm grief had carved between them. "He used to tell me everything," Alexander confided one evening as they watched the children not playing together in the garden. "Every scraped knee, every playground drama, every dream about becoming a dinosaur scientist. Now I don't even know if he's happy or sad or he's healing," Maya said gently. "Healing isn't linear, sometimes it's invisible." The breakthrough came on a Tuesday evening in November. Emma had been fighting a cold, running a slight fever that made her clingy and tearful. Maya was reading to her in the main living room, Gabriel curled in his usual spot nearby, when Emma suddenly burst into sobs. "I want my daddy," she cried, the words torn from somewhere deep and raw. "Why did Daddy leave us? Did I do something wrong?" Maya's heart shattered as she gathered her daughter close, but before she could speak, Gabriel was there, moving for the first time with purpose instead of drifting. He climbed onto the couch and, without a word, wrapped his small arms around Emma. And then, so quietly Maya almost missed it, Gabriel whispered, "Daddies don't leave because of us. Sometimes grown-ups just break." The words hung in the air like miracle and heartbreak combined. Maya looked up to see Alexander standing in the doorway, his face transformed by an emotion too complex for naming. "Gabriel?" Alexander's voice was barely audible. Gabriel looked at his father, and for the first time in 8 months, spoke directly to him. "Emma's sad." Like me, what happened next would replay in Maya's mind for years to come. Alexander crossed the room in 3 strides, dropping to his knees beside the couch, and gathered both children into his arms. Gabriel didn't resist. Instead, he melted into his father's embrace like ice finally meeting sun. "I'm sorry," Alexander whispered against his son's hair. "I'm so sorry I couldn't fix this sooner." "You can't fix everything, Daddy," Gabriel said, his voice rusty from disuse but gaining strength. "But you never stopped trying." From that night forward, Gabriel began to emerge from his cocoon of silence. Not all at once. Healing rarely happens in dramatic revelations, but gradually, like spring returning after the longest winter. He started with single words, then phrases, then full sentences. He told Emma stories about his mother, shared memories that had been locked away in his throat. He asked his father about work, about the world beyond their gates, about whether it was okay to be happy again. Christmas morning found them all in the main living room, surrounded by torn wrapping paper and the comfortable chaos of family. Emma and Gabriel had become inseparable, more siblings than stepchildren, sharing secrets and giggles and the easy affection of children who had found their place in the world. Maya was watching them play with their new toys when Alexander appeared beside her with 2 cups of coffee and an expression she couldn't quite read. "I have something for you," he said, pulling an envelope from his pocket. Maya's hand shook as she opened it, expecting perhaps a bonus or a formal contract renewal. Instead, she found legal documents, adoption papers with her and Emma's names, and another set with Gabriel's name and hers. "I don't understand," she whispered. Alexander sat beside her, his voice uncharacteristically uncertain. "Gabriel asked me if you and Emma were staying forever. When I said I hoped so, He asked why we couldn't make it official. Make you family for real. Ma's vision blurred as tears she'd been holding back for months finally spilled over. Alexander, I can't. This is too much. It's not enough, he interrupted, and when she looked at him, she saw her own feelings reflected in his eyes. Somewhere between you teaching my son to smile again and watching you love him like your own, I fell in love with you, Ma. Yeah, not because you saved Gabriele though you did, but because you showed me what family actually means. The children had gone quiet, sensing the weight of the moment. Gabriel approached them with Emma close behind, his face serious but hopeful. Are you going to be my real mom now? He asked Ma. Yeah, the question carrying the weight of every abandoned child's deepest wish. Ma looked at these three people who had become her world. This man who had offered her not just love but partnership, these children who had healed each other in ways adults couldn't accomplish. The eviction notice that had started this journey seemed like something from another lifetime, another person's nightmare. If you'll have us, she whispered. Gabriel's smile could have powered the entire mansion. We're family, he announced with the certainty of a child who finally understood where he belonged. Later that evening, after the children were asleep and the house had settled into its new kind of quiet, the peaceful silence of a home filled with love rather than the hollow echo of loss, Ma found herself on the terrace with Alexander, looking out over grounds that would soon legally be hers to call home. Are you sure about this? She asked. I came here desperate, with nothing to offer but willingness to care for your son. Alexander turned to her, his eyes reflecting the stars above. You offered everything that mattered. You gave us back our voices, our hope, our ability to be happy again. You took two broken people and showed us how to be whole. As if summoned by their parents' voices, Gabriel appeared in the doorway in his pajamas, Emma close behind him. Can't sleep, Gabriel explained with the sheepish grin of a child testing new boundaries. Bad dreams? Ma asked, opening her arms. Good dreams, Gabriel corrected, settling between his parents with Emma curled against Ma's other side. Dreams about tomorrow. And as they sat together under the winter stars, Ma realized that sometimes the most beautiful families aren't born from blood or choice, but from the simple decision to keep showing up for each other, day after day, until love becomes as natural as breathing. The eviction notice was still somewhere in her old apartment, probably buried under mail she'd never have to worry about again, but it had served its purpose, driving her to this moment, this family, this life she could never have imagined when she was counting change for groceries and praying for miracles. Sometimes miracles come disguised as endings, sometimes the scariest leap leads to the softest landing, and sometimes, when you open your heart to heal someone else's child, you discover that healing runs both ways, connecting souls across the arbitrary lines of biology and circumstance until stranger becomes family, employer becomes partner, and two broken households become one complete home. Thank you, Alexander whispered against her hair as the children dozed between them. For what? For answering that job posting, for taking a chance on us, for showing Gabriel that voices can come back, that families can be rebuilt, that love doesn't always follow the rules we think it should. Ma smiled, feeling the weight of Emma against her left side and Gabriel against her right, Alexander's arm around them all. Thank you for seeing past my desperation to the love underneath. Best hiring decision I ever made, Alexander murmured. And as the first snow of winter began to fall over the Blackwood estate, Ma Chen, soon to be Ma Blackwood, understood that some job interviews change more than your employment status. Some change your entire life, writing new chapters you never dared to dream in, proving that family isn't always something you're born into. Sometimes, it's something you choose, nurture, and build, one healing word at a time.